Hey, we're in. Great, and we're all still here. We've made it. We've made it
Yeah.
through the I don't know, what do you call that? The other side, and we're here now. So Charles, we were just greeting each other there,
The
but
other
look,
side.
lovely to see you again. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
it's been a little while. So spring of the year, and we've got you back in. For everyone else who's entering into the room, lovely to have you here. Thank you for coming. I hope you're all great. Tiny bit of housekeeping before we get started, and then we're just going to get stuck into hearing everything that Charles has to teach us about tech, hiring, and how working as a developer, and all of these lovely things. But just very quickly, tiny bit of housekeeping.
How
Today is being
exciting.
recorded. Today is being recorded, so if anybody needs to kind of duck out early, obviously don't worry. And if you want to revisit this information, you'll be able to. It'll be in the careers hub within the next kind of 24 hours or so. Um, Separately to that, we obviously have a really nice chat function. So we have Q&A, we have chat. Please, ask any questions. That's what we're here to do. So let's use our time really well. And thanks to everyone. Some people have already put their LinkedIn profiles in. So Charles is going to love that. All recruiters like to stay in touch on LinkedIn so that they can find you really easily. So all,
100%.
yeah, all of us can share that. And then that's kind of it. Today, obviously, we have an hour together. We'll never go over, but let's try and use that hour really well. And yeah, that's it. So come here, Charles. You don't really need a massive introduction, but you might do because it's a while since we've had you live. But we are all really familiar with one another.
Yes.
Charles, you're a recruiter based in Reading in the UK. But you have a lot of experience of working with some of the alumni here, and have some really nice stories to tell about how others have worked with you, and what some people here today might do
Yeah.
in the future, in the very near future.
100%. Yeah, definitely. So just as Jane touched on, I am the founder of Your Next Hire. So we specialize in technical recruitment. Our specialism is building software engineering teams. So we work with companies like Zoopla, NSEC, Sky. So really, really cool companies, both within clean tech and then more towards like software engineering. We cover everything. So from like JavaScript, PHP, Python. I think for the Code Institute, I know you guys cover fundamental and Python. A lot of me, it's more just towards knowledge sharing. So we've had quite a few junior developers in process from Code Institute on current roles at the moment as well. So more than happy to share some knowledge tips as to what's worked well for people, and what to look out for when interviewing.
Lovely. So come here. Let's maybe we should start at the start, right? So, how we kind of positioned today was that exactly what
Yes.
you've just said there. This is an agency environment, so you're a really, really, really important intermediary sort of part of the recruitment process between being very influential in companies that you work for, and then obviously being heavily engaged with the
Yes.
jobs market. So, for anyone who hasn't really thought about this before, there's a really big difference between an internal TA recruiter and an agency recruiter who will have kind of multiple clients at once. And sometimes the process can be quite different as well, can't it? So,
100%.
so
Yeah.
for anyone kind of navigating through a recruitment journey right now, there's a couple of things that Charles can be really helpful with, with helping you with. And one of the things that I thought would be really good to start with is, for somebody who is writing up a CV, wants it to look very technical, maybe is kind of starting, so it's not so straightforward, and that they can't just plonk their last three software development roles on it. So we're kind of telling that narrative. Have you any kind of tips that you think makes a CV jump out really, really well, and that would make someone like you pick up the phone and open that conversation and explore a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I think the key tip that I give to all developers, and this is even for senior developers with like 15 years experience, they can always use a little refresher on the best way to represent themselves on a CV. You want to think of it as more like an advertisement. So what does a recruiter, like someone on my end, or the hiring manager want to see? So some people aren't too, say, they don't highlight the key projects around the tech that they're going for. So you want to understand the discipline and the roles that you're going to be going for. So if you're Python backend and that is your specialism, and that's what you want to hunker down and apply to those roles, you want to position your CV to show that the projects you've worked on are Python. If you haven't got any Python exposure, but you've done like Python courses or you've gone out of your way to do certifications, make sure that they're highlighted on your CV under key skills. That is the most important thing. In terms of projects, it's always nice to see if you haven't got any commercial experience, but at Code Institute, for example, you've worked on full stack applications, or you've built applications, you want to discuss the tech that you've used in those projects. So if that's collaborating with a team, if that's building out APIs, that's more towards front end, and that was where your specialism was, you want to mention that. Give us a little bit of a highlight in terms of a couple of bullet points, what you've done on those projects, what tech was used. So when I look at your portfolio, I can see, if I'm recruiting for a Python developer, they've utilized Python in this project, Python in this project, this is their passion. Other developers, will list 10 to 15 different key skills. And when I see a CV straight away, I don't know whether they're a Python dev or if they're a PHP developer. So just being a little bit niche towards the technologies you're interested in, that can always help.
So tailoring it, because we talk a lot about that actually, and just being, what you said there at the beginning, something that we always say in our CV masterclasses is like, your CV is about you, but it's not for you. Like this has to be, it has to invoke a response from somebody else. So it's not
100%.
like, there's, you have to be really selective what you put in it, and that takes a little bit of thinking about. So you just have to bear in mind who's going to read this and what do you want it to do. So for you, obviously, it's very quick. You tend to kind of have a lot of screening to do, so decisions are made quite quickly when you're looking at documents. So taking the time to maybe do a little bit of, I suppose, focusing on what it is that you're applying for, and having subtle tweaks to your CV to make sure that this is a sensible application and the person receiving it is going to respond or react in a positive way.
Yeah, to understand the process as well, to put it as simply put, is the recruiter is going to speak to you, understand what your passions are, why you're interested in the job that the recruiter is going to be asking if you're good for, essentially. They'll then send your CV through to a hiring manager, which is going to be the software engineering manager, or someone who's management within that company. And then they're going to say this person is good for, let's say, the Python role. And if your CV is centered towards PHP and JavaScript, that hiring manager probably won't be able to see that you've done too much around Python, or you have experience around Python. So you want to look at it like that and just think, right, what roles do I want to focus on and apply for, and how can I tailor my CV so it's more specific to that.
Yeah. So plan this and put a bit of thought in before you waste a lot of time and get confused about why.
And you can have different CVs. People do have different CVs. If you're a junior developer and you've mastered the basics in different languages, you might not want to limit yourself to just Python. You might have passion to also consider full stack, and you might want to look into JavaScript front end. But I would probably say, maybe have different CVs that boast a little bit more about each technology on each one. Because that in itself is quite complicated when you're applying for different roles at different technologies, because that's a bit of a tough one for a junior, isn't it? But that's probably my best advice for that.
You've had you and I, obviously we've conversed quite a few times, but you gave us some lovely advice here one time before, because you're quite familiar with a lot of the kind of profiles and the types of people coming through, and you've seen people do really clever stuff around the selection of what kind of projects they work on and how they've used them in a really practical way in interviews. And one of those stories tell me always sticks out with the lady that you worked with, who's I think she was a truck driver, was she? And then do you remember she was so something like this is really useful for everyone here today, because thinking about those projects in advance, if you have a little bit of a particular area of interest, can be incredibly useful then at an interview stage, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for junior developers, and look, I don't want to stress anyone out, because there is developers that we speak to that don't have the time in the day. They've got families, they've got other jobs, and when you have those commitments, just tell a recruiter and just say, look, this is what my experience looks like from Code Institute. I've also got a full-time job, and people will understand that. But if you've got some spare time on the weekends or outside of work, just keep building on those projects. Spend half an hour to an hour a day. Just keep going into your GitHub and make sure that you're contributing to other people's repositories, or you're building your own applications. Because we had a lady who's from Code Institute who's in the mix for a junior developer role at the moment, for the one we're going to advertise in a second, for the sustainability consultancy. There's a couple of roles available. She has absolutely bossed her GitHub. So it's something like 3,000 contributions in the last year. That alone, all I had to message was the hiring manager and say, look, you can see the passion there. She works full time as a carer at the moment, so she's not a developer, but she's putting her all of her heart and soul into getting her next job, and that's just what people are looking for. So just make sure that's represented in your projects as well, and that will definitely stead you a good chance.
Amazing. Okay, so come here. There's a couple of things I want to get through. So in terms of structure, I know you've got a couple of open roles right now, which would be, this is obviously a perfect opportunity for everyone to hear about them.
Yes.
And you shared the spec with us just before. So anyone who wants to take a look at that, it's here in the file section. You can open it as a job description, and you can obviously you can hold on to that, but you can review it as we're talking through. So will we go through that? And then if there's any other roles that you want to talk about, we can do that. And then let's try and leave some time as well for maybe just some tips around like tech tests or any sort of insights that you may have on that. Because,
Yeah, definitely.
or even just like what you said about GitHub, you know, how people interpret that, and, you know, some tips that people might take away before they start sharing that abundantly as they go interviewing.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want, just in terms of this, do you want me to go over the role now, or would you like to
Yeah,
cover?
let's start with that Python role. Megan has just shared that in the chat, guys. So it's in the file section. I presume it was a pop-up for you all, so you can take a look. So tell us about the company. It's an energy role, isn't it? You do a lot of work in that space.
No.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
sorry,
basically, no, it's not. This is slightly different for this one. Very good memory though. Good memory.
Yeah.
But essentially, this one's it's even cooler. It's even cooler. So these guys are the #1 leaders in sustainability consultancy. So
Oh,
essentially, what you've got is like massive data-driven projects in
yeah.
Python and Django and SQL, which is obviously very relevant to Code Institute. Those projects themselves drive sustainability within big companies. So all your local supermarkets, so your Tesco's, your Waitrose, Asda, all of the big retailers, so like Nike, Adidas, Next, Hugo Boss, literally everyone.
Yeah.
And the reason being is what these projects do is they understand the carbon emissions for each of those consumers or the customers, and the projects themselves basically hold them accountable to carbon tax. So it helps reduce their energy bills in terms of energy usage within that business. And the data itself is used by the consultants of the company to help those bigger companies become more sustainable. It's a little bit complex. The projects themselves are really, really big, like data heavy projects, but anyone who's got a passion for Python likes the data side. So like back end, bit of data engineering.
Sorry, Charles, your audio has just disappeared there. Maybe try and knock off the camera for a sec. Sometimes that helps. Poor Charles. Okay, so he's obviously going to go out and come back in again. I presume everybody else couldn't hear him either, right? It's not just me. Okay, fingers crossed. So, guys, just while we're waiting for Charles, so I have put in, I've also put in the chat Charles's LinkedIn and also a link, his website, basically Charles's company. Oh, great. Okay, so it's not just me. Okay, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Shelley. But I also put in his company, which is called Your Next Hire. It's ynh.com, and that's where you'll be able to find him as well. Hi, Charles. Welcome back.
Hey, sorry
Oh,
about that,
good.
guys. I've got a
Oh,
call and it
perfect.
just messed everything up.
Oh,
Apologies.
that's
Sorry about that.
that's all right. The life of a recruiter. You're never not talking.
The live recruiter.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry guys, apologies.
So the bit
So
where
yeah,
just
just
from
go
memory
on.
was
Sorry.
when you were just saying about if you've got a really big passion for, like, I think it was like data, working with analytics. So that was kind of where we lost you. So that's where Deacon.
Yeah, it's quite hard to give an overview on the role itself without waffling essentially, because it is quite complex in terms of the systems built. But if you've got an experience with Python, you like back-end engineering, so any exposure or like a passion for like APIs,
Yeah.
the data side of things, that's going to be the go-to for this one. If you've been more specializing around like JavaScript, PHP, and you like your React, your UI, I've got some other roles. I wouldn't
Okay.
apply for this one because
Okay.
they will suss you out. But if you like your Python backend, this would be a good one.
That's it. So anyone kind of tinkering with their CV before they send it into you, that's where to put the emphasis and the language and the
That's what we
definition
want to
and
reflect.
the projects.
And we'll
Okay.
want to see that on GitHubs as well, because sometimes developers will say that that's their passions, and you go on GitHub and you'll just see lots of work on the front end, which is absolutely fine. But you'd want to see some projects in Python or that reflect on the CV. 100%.
So just make sure it's kind of linking up and make the consistent messages there.
Exactly
Cool.
that. And yeah, that's the crux of it. It's fully remote.
Yep.
Applicants, I know you're between Ireland and UK, would need to be UK based.
So
Sadly, on this one,
anywhere in the UK, but it's obviously remote, so you can work from home.
anywhere in the UK, it's
Okay.
remote. They've got an amazing support framework. So any junior devs thinking, how does remote working and the training and mentoring side work? It
Yeah.
works really, really well with this. So yeah,
Okay. Is it a big company, mid-size, small, startup?
I'd say scale up. So they're about 450 at the moment,
Yeah.
but they're going through a seed fund at the moment. So we should
Okay.
be like
Exciting.
probably scaling. Exciting times,
Lovely.
yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay. So and then there are some instructions on the bottom of the spec to either contact Archie or you. I presume it's you, Charles, it's not another
Yes.
Charles. Okay. So someone should just do that.
Yeah, Archie's one of
Email.
my consultants. So yeah, it'll be between me and Archie just to take the workload off myself.
Okay. All right. Exciting. So everyone can get busy kind of doing that. I've also put links in for your own website, so and for your LinkedIn profile, so that people can sort of stay in touch with you. Because that's a question that we get
Brilliant.
a lot. Like, what's the best way to get alerted in between your visits here for roles? And my usual answer is stay in contact with him on LinkedIn, but get your CV up in his database because then he'll be able to find you. Is that still the right advice for someone?
Yeah, we've got if they connect with myself, the one that you put in, that's brilliant. And
Yeah.
then just had quite a few invites come
LinkedIn.
through, so that's awesome.
Brilliant. Yeah.
If they just go onto my page itself and then click your next hire, the business page,
Yeah.
if they just follow that, that will stay up to date with all the junior roles that we'll be posting, and there'll be quite a
Excellent.
few more in the next couple of days, so that'll help them.
Okay. All right, cool. You mentioned that you did at the beginning of this when you were saying that this Python role was, positioned in a certain way for people with those kind of analytical kind of data backend sort of interests. Are there other roles that
Yeah.
you'd like to talk about while you're here, or do you want to get redirected to your site to look at them?
Yeah, we'll do redirects just because those roles aren't live yet, so I
Perfect.
wouldn't know which one to choose. But if
Yeah.
they just register what they're interested in, even if they just reach out to me a message, say, "Hi Charles, looking at
Yeah.
JavaScript roles or Python roles," I'll pop them on the system for that, and then I'll keep them up to date.
Perfect. This is we do a whole seminar that we talk about the hidden jobs market and basically explain it. And, it was interesting because my background is all agency recruitment. And I remember when, people started talking to me about this thing called the hidden jobs market. And I was like, well, I don't really understand what you mean. But then when I
Yeah,
realized that, as a recruiter, very often putting an ad up is one of the last things that you do because mostly
it's true.
it
Yeah,
adds
it's
a
true.
lot of administration and, maybe sometimes it's just kind of procedural rather than actually where you find the person because you're working the market non-stop and talking to people all the time. So you usually have people at the forefront of your mind that are going to be really good. And the first thing you do is jump on the phone and see if they're available and sort of very often inadvertently even build a short list based on your contacts rather than a list of applications. And this is just,
100%.
and like when we try and explain that to people, there's loads of ways that people hire without advertising. And that's basically all the hidden jobs market means. So situations like today when we can sort of find a way to get in contact with you before you're looking for your next role can obviously is a really good sidestep into being there and being visible so that when someone like you comes along and wants to hire in roles that aren't on the market yet, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. So that's a really nice
100%.
opportunity, is what you meant there.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking the diamonds with the dirt because with the job board side, you want to get on the job boards. You're going to have lots of chats with recruiters. Some people get stressed because sometimes it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months of constant conversations. What your skills, what you're looking for until they actually find a job. But once you get into those, I would say communities. But once
Mm.
you're on the databases, like you said, what you don't realize is you're then in that agency's database. So once they've got a junior role, might not be now, might be in 4 weeks' time, they might go, actually, do you know what? We had a chat. They hit you up, and then
Yeah,
comes out of nothing. So yeah, just do as much as you can. Any activity, talking to consultants or applying for jobs, definitely going to help you with your
yeah.
chances.
And it is pretty amazing, just obviously, and from an agency perspective, how quickly once something is live, the expectations on you as a consultant are really
Yeah,
high.
pressure's
Like
crazy, isn't it?
it's nuts.
Yeah.
You haven't got the time often to do all those searches, so that's why you're constantly talking to people and building those pipelines because the speed that's expected is pretty intense. But look,
100%.
so come here. So you when we were talking before, we get a lot of questions about tech tests, and obviously tech tests
Yeah.
come in all sorts of varieties. They're totally dependent on what the company wants to do. But have you any sort of insights to somebody who's kind of preparing for this, maybe is doing it for the first time, as to what they might expect and how they might prepare, and maybe some examples of sort of I don't mean the minutiae of the tech test, but the sort of formats that people could be expected to experience.
Yeah, I'd say I'll say one that I can reference a little bit clearly, just because from the technical side, yeah, I'm technical, but I not in all aspects, if that makes sense. So, for example, we've got a couple of technical tests at the moment, which are to build an API, or let's say a simple CRUD application. So you create, read, update, delete. In terms of those, what I would say to junior developers is keep it simple. Obviously, clean modular code, which everyone is taught.
Mhm.
That's what you want to adhere to. If there's anything fancy that you wanted to go out of your way in terms of like functionality or the way in which you're writing code, you can do so, but I would say to add that on as like an addition, and it's worked really well for quite a few juniors that have come through us more recently.
Okay.
So stick to what they're asking for in terms of the technical test itself. Try not to overcomplicate things. You want to sit down beforehand, think about the theory. So, if you're going to create a CRUD application or an API, think about the theory. What's the best practice in which you can build it, and then go ahead and build it. We've had some devs which have just cracked on with it for a couple of hours and then called us and been like, right, I've gone completely wrong, haven't thought about this, I need to restart, which is cool because you've
And
got
is that
so many
okay?
different tests to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, that 20 to 30 minute investment beforehand to just sit down, map out, the way in which you're going to build said application or complete the test. That's fundamental. That's key. The other thing is like it's like the README document. So we've had quite a few candidates where they've built an API and then they've explained their application build. So they've done like a flow chart of the application. Very test dependent. If it's going to be a more of like a question and answer test, then that's not relevant because you're just answering the questions, you submit the test, it's done. But if
Hmm.
you're building an application, it might be nice, if you do get through to the next stage, to then have a flow chart to explain the application, explain the way in which that you've built it. And this is the big one. This is how I prep all my candidates to absolutely smash the final stages. Is if you do get through to the final stage, it's obviously
Hmm.
fingers crossed that everyone does, you then need to be able to articulate why you've built that application in the way you have. And you also need to understand how you could have done better. So you never want to be a developer that thinks that that is the best way that they've built the application. Even if it is, you should always want to go the extra mile to explore how could I have built that better, or what could I have incorporated to make that more functional, or there's lots of different avenues, but you always just want to show you're open to feedback, open to learning, because at the end of the day, it's a junior developer role. Do you know what I mean? There's not too many expectations around that.
And would you find that in a kind of a situation like that, that when because sometimes doing the like, not that coding is easy, but it's the focus of the skills. So you're kind of in that mindset that when you're going into an interview, they're going to be judging my code. So it can be a bit of a surprise to have to be really articulate about it as well and be ready to explain
Yeah,
it. In terms of practicing that, do you think
definitely.
literally just practice it yourself at home out loud, talk through, ask yourself questions about why you
Yeah,
did it this way and not a different way?
it's probably the funniest thing because that's probably what people are most nervous about. But
Yeah.
what they should actually be, and this is what I just try as a consultant, is you should actually be the most excited about it because it gives you a chance to justify why you've built what you've built. And 9 times out of 10, they're not judging you by the quality of your code or how you structure code. It's more what your thought process was, why you did what you did, and if you're open to learning. So maybe your application isn't the best, but you can justify why you've done what you've done, which means you've got good logic.
Hmm.
And if you had more experience, then you would have tackled it a different way. So it's more just being able to reason and understand this is why I did it, but how could I have done it better? Or if you can get someone to look over it, a friend, or if you look at it yourself, a day later and think,
Yeah.
could I have done it a different way? You can definitely explore how to do it a different way. And then you can come into an interview and say, right, this is how I built it, but a little bit unsure on these parts. I think I could have done better here and here and here. Only problem is I can't identify, why. That's the only thing that's bugging me. And
Yeah.
just being authentic, just easy going. That's what people are looking for. You are looking to invest in a junior developer.
Hmm.
So if I even for me, when I hire junior consultants for the team, I'm not looking for someone who's an out and out sales legend. I'm
Yeah.
just looking at someone that is going to, receive critical feedback, is going to be able to learn,
Yeah.
and has that passion to want to learn. Do you know what I mean? So make sure you come across like that in the interview, and I think you should be pretty good.
It's interesting, one of the things that you said there as well about being kind of comfortable. Like, you were very comfortable there with your example, going, I don't really know how I did that, and I would have liked it done this way, but I couldn't figure out how. And some people get really nervous in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
being really heavily judged in an interview, that if they don't know it 100%, they're wrong and they've blown their chances. But actually,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
not really very often the case. It's
No,
particularly with
it
a
comes
role
it
at this
comes with
level. Yeah.
experience, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the main thing is to, I think, to think that if you only had one shot at an interview and you only ever had one interview, then yeah, okay, I would be absolutely bricking myself to go into an interview. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. Just relax, try and enjoy yourself in the process, and naturally, it's going to come. You might have to do 100 interviews. I know devs that it's taken them months, if not a year, which not best case, but if you've got a passion for it, you're willing to put yourself through something like Code Institute, just keep kicking on, and it's going to come. But make sure you have fun in the process. Don't not be yourself for the sake of stressing about an interview. Just be honest, be open and honest about what you don't know and what you do know, and then coming into a business, someone knows your strengths and your weaknesses, and then it's even easier to train you because you know where you fall short. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That generally is all the time the feedback we get. That's the junior developers that do well, they tackle it like that. They're not overthinking, they're not stressing out. They're just in a position where they're like, this is my ability, this is what I can do, but this is why I'm joining the role. I want to be mentored, I want to know how I can get better. And they use that kind of that passion in the interview, I guess.
But yeah, and then also the sort of the level of self-awareness, like sometimes, knowing what you know and knowing how much you've learned and being able to articulate just how quickly you've sort of had to absorb all of this and, the intensity of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And also knowing I don't really know what I would do here and I'm comfortable knowing where my boundaries are right now, or might not my boundaries, but maybe my slight limitations because of the time I've had so far to learn this. But it's
1,000%.
interesting. Yeah, like it's really interesting what you said there about if you're hiring somebody, you're investing in them, and particularly when you're hiring someone at a kind of an early stage in this career, anyway, in their tech career. What you're
Yeah.
really curious about is what they've learned so far quickly, what their methodology is of learning, and are they going to listen if you try and teach them something else? Because you can train people the rest of your life, and some will listen and some will not. So you're really looking for somebody
Yeah.
engaged in it and is going to be able to progress.
And that's where the confidence and passion comes from. So for me, it's a really really good tip. And if you're a junior watching it, I would definitely advise to do this. Is because most of your interviews are going to be video interviews. The main thing is smiling. So I do this like constantly, even when I'm with the big VPs of Zoopla trying to get them on board as a client. This is me. Straight out the way, I'm like that. It's not even a fake smile because I just naturally keep smiling. But that's how you have to be, because if you're sat like this when someone's ripping apart your technical test, it just automatically looks negative, and people completely forget that. So that's the main thing: is are these people going to want you to join their team? Are they going to want to invest in you? And if you're a nice person, you're a decent coder, that's what they're looking for. So just be wary to smile, because honestly, I do it. I used to do it. Some people get so stressed in the interview itself, and they're so nervous that they're not smiling, and you could come across as quite a moody person, when actually personality for a junior dev that's everything. Do you know what I mean? It's you're investing in what that person's soft skills are like. Are they willing to go through the ups and downs to become a developer? Because even as a mid-level or senior, you're always going to be learning stuff, and if you're someone that's going to get stressed out with learning, or being stuck on a bug fix for a couple of days, then it's probably not the role for you. So definitely keep smiling, show that you're happy with the challenge, and it's easy once you get used to it.
So we'll have to do some
But trust me, it is. Trust
smiling
me,
masterclasses.
yeah.
Yeah. But look, do
No,
you know
trust
what?
me, it's a big one.
No, I do know what you mean. And actually it's something like it's something, there's a technique to interviewing, and there's loads of ways that, some people have an advantage in an interview because they're very comfortable talking about themselves and they're very
Yeah, yeah, true,
and
true.
they're good at it. And sometimes that can help the conversation be kind of more fruitful because you find out a bit more. And obviously that's, it's not so fair on people who get very, very anxious about these sorts of scenarios. But I think one of the key things that you said there is, the more interview you're doing, the better. The more people you're talking to, the better. And you can practice. And I spoke to a really lovely junior dev who just recently, she was all excited. She's just got her first dev role. But some of
Nice.
her feedback was, yeah. So like, and some of her nice feedback was that like she was really confused as she set off to go interviewing as to what was expected, and that made her nervous. And then she realized, she started coming to these things and was like,
Yeah,
oh, I can learn how to do this. So, like, you can learn how to do this, and
yeah,
it's a lot
exactly. Yeah,
easier.
yeah.
It's a lot easier than learning to code. So you're all able for it, very definitely.
100%.
So,
Just keep smiling.
okay. And so come here, in terms of kind of practicing, just I know I didn't ask you this before, but any observations of like really good platforms where you think are good places where people can go and kind of try out tech tests? I get different answers from
The,
everyone I ask, so it's obviously very dependent on your own
yeah,
preference.
your dev focused communities, which I'll be completely honest, devs are going to be a little bit more in tune with that. Is going to be like your Reddits, just Google in general, just being able
Yeah,
to, especially if you're stuck on certain aspects of like if you're trying to learn how to implement new technology or stuff like that, you want to
yeah,
go into the Google, you want to go into forums, you want to use GitHub, you want to see
yeah,
other people's projects, you want to contribute with other people. See,
yeah,
like Code Institute is a perfect example of that. It's all about collaboration, and you'll never, if you're never going to be collaborating with other developers, you'll never learn. Like everyone uses Google, everyone is learning from other developers. Otherwise,
yeah,
we'd have never advanced to where we're at as in IT. Do you know what I mean? So always remember that that is the number one thing, is to turn to other people. It's knowledge sharing, and then obviously just to pay that back in a couple of years, once hopefully you guys are at mid-level to seniors, then you'll do the same to junior developers, and you'll learn from your junior developers as well, because they got their ear to the ground with the newest technologies, and that
yeah,
generally is like how the development ecosystem works. So I would
yeah,
say just keep looking and collaborating with other developers. I know you guys got like mentoring schemes and stuff like that, so
yeah,
take full advantage of that, and just make sure your portfolios are in check as well, especially on your GitHub. You know, I've had before where people have chosen to then have websites and stuff like that, which is absolutely great. It's great to have something like that, but if your website doesn't work when I click CV or to your portfolio because it's down, it's simple stuff like that. Just check that, because that's going
yeah,
to be the first thing people are looking at, and that's not a great first impression. So
yeah.
and you'd be surprised that a lot of people fall short and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely check
Really
that.
small things, unfortunately, can, if you're not prepared, you might overlook them, and they can have a really big
It's
impact on
tough. There's
somebody
a
who's sort
lot.
of meeting you. I know there's a lot that to keep pretty
Yeah,
like to keep you pretty busy, but these things can also save you a lot of time. You know, like we would talk a lot about just getting
yeah,
really
true.
prepared. Like make sure your documents have been checked, make sure that they look good, make sure that you've thought through what message you're trying to put out there. Because if you want to do quite a few interviews, you also want to make sure that they're good interviews and that you're learning something from them, and that your
Definitely,
documents are performing for you when you go out. So, when people say to me, "Oh, I've made
100%.
hundreds of applications and no one's responding," I kind of think, well, hang on a second, that shouldn't be happening. There's something wrong with the documents. Like it shouldn't have got to that point where you've sent out multiple documents and people aren't coming back to you, because there's way better, more efficient ways of doing this. And I think we're really lucky in
True.
tech because there's so much community-based activity that you can have a lot of really nice conversations with people well in advance of sitting in the hot seat, and that can really ease those conversations and keep you really well prepared and informed of what to expect.
Definitely, and that's
Yeah,
something we're going to be doing quite a lot of, is that knowledge sharing with like engineering managers of like Sky and Zoopla, and there'll be some cool stuff we're pumping out, which I'll speak to you about separately, Jane. But that's
yeah.
definitely the way forward, is knowledge sharing.
Yeah, cool. So come here, one quick last thing, a little bit of insights as well, just to get your thoughts on this. And it leads on really nicely from what we were saying there. We run a lot of hackathons, as you're probably aware of to a certain
Yes.
extent. So
Yeah.
we obviously everybody here is being kind of graded on their individual work in terms of in terms of their Code Institute diploma, but in terms of their journey to going to actually work, in that recruitment bit and being able to have content. Would you give the same advice that involving yourself in those hackathons is brilliant interview kind of fuel, if you like, to be able to give examples of teamwork and collaboration and a project that you've brought from concept to fruition over a couple of days, just in case you're a bit light, particularly if
Yeah,
it's a
definitely.
stranger. Yeah,
Yeah, 100%. A lot of companies themselves do internal hackathons, so it's like that's just general, like just rapport building with
yeah,
developers. So anyone getting involved with stuff like that, that's very relevant. And yeah, whack that on your CV. And it's good to discuss in interviews as well. You can say that I've touched on this here, touched on this here. Everything's relevant, right? That's what we said. So if you've
yeah.
got the opportunity to get involved with stuff like that, yeah, 1,000% do it. Get involved.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. So come here, just as we get to, I know we're coming close to the sort of the last kind of section of this. So if anyone has questions for Charles, please pop them in the chat. But in terms of, can I ask you just about the Python role that you were in, kind of inviting applications for? What's
Yes.
and I ask this a lot because I'm always kind of curious for us to get an average. What's the kind of rough time do you think on average for recruitment cycles? Would it be about 6 weeks? Does it just
Um,
depend?
I pers- Mine is probably a little bit of bias, but it maybe because I'm so good as a recruiter. So, but no, mine is very fast turnarounds in this market. Like we're probably looking at about a week to 2 weeks with no technical test. So
Okay.
just for example, on this one, there is no tech test. I've been working with the hiring manager for years. I actually placed him. So it's literally just I send the CV, I book the interviews. So I'm the one that makes the decision making around that. They'll interview within 2 to 3 days, which
Yeah.
would be like a Zoom call. And then they'll bring anyone who's successful to final stage literally back within 2 to 3 days, and then we'll make an offer.
Okay.
So I think
Lovely.
with the markets how they used to be, like when we last spoke, yeah, probably like 6 weeks, but right now, no way. Like any decent company will be turning around fast. Like 2 to 4 weeks is probably more realistic. But again, dependent on company, but people will move fast. So you want to make sure that, if you are working, that you can try and schedule a couple of days where you can fit in a good couple interviews, because processes will move quick for the right candidate.
So this is that's kind of goal. So if you're applying in a situation like this and this happens very quickly,
Yeah,
hence another reason why you just need to be prepped and you need to be able to talk about yourself. You need to be able to kind of talk about one of your projects. So even if you're not interviewing just yet, it's time really well spent to get ready for this, because something like this may happen really quickly and then you're potentially a bit nervous
definitely.
because you haven't really got ready yet. So just, another really good example of how quickly you could find yourself in an interview room with somebody talking about yourself. So if you're preparing for
Thousand
that,
percent.
just
Refresh yourself.
yeah,
Refresh yourself on your most recent projects, your key skills in tech, what you're passionate about, and why you got into development. And that should be second nature to people that have then gone to put themselves through something like Code Institute. And
yeah,
again, like I say to a lot of the CI alumni, is if I put you in front of a hiring manager, the first thing I'm saying is they've invested in themselves to
yeah.
get into development, and that is like that in itself is a selling point. So
It really nice
definitely back yourself with
statement.
it.
So that was interesting what you said
100%.
there. So these roles, you're the decision maker on who gets to interview. And for anyone who hasn't been an agency recruiter, that is really indicative of just how kind of the level of influence that a good relationship has. So the CV isn't going into any portal and sitting and being screened. This Charles is doing that first bit and booking it straight in for an interview. You have access to the hiring manager's diary, obviously, and you're able to just kind of manage those scenarios. So that's a massive time save, and a really good example of how relationships can kind of make placements. Really, isn't it? It's amazing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but you
No, I
said
was gonna say there's a lot of agencies right now, like us especially. Is I sit on the board for like 6, 7 companies for their talent teams, and there's a lot of agencies which are actually like migrated internal. So don't
yeah,
be confused when you're speaking to an agent. Sometimes their relationship with hiring managers is second to none. So make sure you're pitching yourselves to the agents.
yeah.
And have that respect there as well, because some people they just think an agent's just an agent. Do you know what I mean? They don't know what they're talking about, and sometimes you're actually speaking to the person who's going to be deciding whether you interview or not, and it's good
Yeah,
to bear that in mind.
exactly. Yeah, it's always an interview when you're talking to somebody external like this. So just,
Thousand
yeah,
percent.
yeah.
Always smile as well.
As well. And you said that there's no tech test. So are you basing your criteria on sort of conversation,
Portfolios,
motivation, and portfolios?
portfolio, GitHub.
Yeah,
Yeah, GitHub portfolios. Any like material that can show the way that they structure code. That's again, you need a GitHub. Like if I go on their GitHub and there's no Python projects, I,
hmm
I won't call them about a Python role, even if it said that they're a Python engineer, because we've got so many applications of people that can proof their work, and I can physically view it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
So again, another reason why portfolios or GitHubs are definitely very important.
Okay. So there's a few questions there, all of which are related to sort of location. So Alexa was in there first. Just curious, obviously you're based in the UK and you're in Reading, but are you recruiting all over the UK and do you ever do international recruitment?
We do international recruitment. It's more case by case, because a lot of our teams, our focus is UK based. That's where
Yep.
I've built up the network over the last couple of years.
Yep.
But yeah, no, that is definitely something we'll branch out into. So yeah,
Perfect. So stay in touch. And then
1000%.
also, and we get asked this a lot. So like, obviously we operate all over Europe, internationally as well. Sorry, but the biggest percentage of people here would be in Europe. But in these sort of recruitment conversations, we often get asked about relocations. So if somebody isn't in the UK now, but can come here and presumably is visa ready and stuff, is that something that you would see much of?
Yeah, it's normally with, especially for like junior roles, it's more with like internships, or
Oh, okay.
especially with like the big companies. So there's some agencies which, if you get hit up by an agency where they say we specialize in candidates with like sponsorship and stuff like that, then obviously that's your go-to. Like, make sure that you're networking within those types of companies, and
Hmm.
you can get, you know, your CV over onto their databases. But I'd also just look at the big like consultancies, look at the big tech companies, because
Yeah.
they're always in a position to offer sponsorship. That's your best route in. Most of the people that I placed that had required sponsorship and no longer need it are from the likes of, you know, your Sky, your Barclays. So look at those companies. That'd be your best bet to start with.
Yeah. And for obvious reasons, in case anyone's kind of curious about that, they just have like kind of more resources internally and a bigger stretch just because there's, you know, the sheer scale and volume of them. They normally would have kind of
And
encountered this
the money as
situation.
well. Yeah,
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
normally they've got budget signed off for it, and
Yeah.
because they're such successful companies, they want to get ahead by offering sponsorships and stuff, and they're happy to make that investment.
Yeah. So that like the cost is a big consideration, and obviously for a smaller business,
Big, yeah,
sometimes yeah, like it's not even just the investment in doing it, but then just kind of the risk that, you know, an international move can go wrong so often, and a smaller business
yeah, it's true,
will feel that much, you know, more
definitely.
severely than the likes of your Sky. Okay,
Big
amazing.
conglomerates, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So come here. Look, I know your diary is so busy. But look, 4 to 5 minutes with an agency recruiter moving at the speed of light is quite a valuable 45 minutes. So Charles, thank you so much for joining us. So look
More than
for
welcome.
anyone. Oh, sorry. There's a couple of no, a couple of quick questions that
Now
have
we
come
got it.
in
It's cool. It's cool.
there. Yeah, can you see them there? So, question
Yeah,
from
yeah,
Arthur. In
I
terms of
can.
tech tests, what would you recommend working on solving algorithm type tests or continue building projects? I have been fully doing the former.
In terms of tech tests, would you recommend working solving algorithmic type test sets and continue building projects? See, that's a good question, but that's more company specific. So because my role is data heavy, they used to do an algorithmic test. So that would be more based towards like back-end engineering. Other
Mhm.
companies will want to see you build an application or build an API. It just depends on how relevant it is to their projects. So I would say do everything, do as much as you can. If you've got the time there, just that's a good time investment, because loads of different companies have loads of different tech tests, and if you don't do it now, you're going to do it at some point in the future. So yeah, case by case really.
So
So
maybe sort of alternate them depending on what time you have available to you. And again, look, Charles, you were very
exactly,
realistic
yeah,
about it. You know, we're all very mindful that we don't all have loads of, you know, there isn't an endless, infinite amount of time. You know, we all have different things to do. But just if you know, it's time really well spent. So if you do have an additional little portion of time somewhere, this kind of stuff can really help you. And then there's a question there from
definitely, yeah,
David.
yeah.
So sorry, thanks, David.
Just have a
So
look.
David is just
Fire
asking
through.
about an internship. Is an internship a valuable pursuit post course, or should one hold out, develop further, and then apply for entry level dev roles? Um, it-
That again is
it's
more just
very
case by case. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, some engineers would, you know, maybe just have a nice stride of luck and bag the role that they wanted. Others may be forced to go down more the internship route and then pursue, you know, a full-time permanent role. But again, it's case by case. Just think about how it is for you. If you know, hunker down for a couple months and pursue a role which is, you know, what you require in terms of, you got it, mate. Just you got it.
Well, look, you're really equipped coming out of here to go straight into.
Can you hear me, Jane? Or
Yeah, it
yeah,
broke
you
up a
got
little bit there, all right, but we can hear you now. But I suppose another thing about that, David,
yeah, it's
and I
cool.
don't know, I don't have all your details here, but just it also depends on your starting point, you know, and just how formal of a sort of internship it is. And you know, you'll see, particularly like mid or larger size businesses may have formal sort of programs, whether they're, you know, the summer stuff or a few months, but usually they're doing it. Obviously, they're investing in this with a view to hiring, so you can kind of gauge that. So it can be a really nice step into a business. Um, but
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
for many people who've worked before, some of those work behaviors have been learnt. But it's certainly never. It's never a bad use of time, but there's no reason why you can't pursue both at the same time also, and just see
Yeah,
what
definitely.
seems most useful. Um,
100%.
Okay, cool. So David, hope that helps. And then Shelley, can you see
Shelley.
that question there? So question from Shelley. Would it go
Yeah, yeah.
against you if GitHub only contains your code along projects and portfolio projects? Currently working full-time with young children. Yes, so time is not a huge amount of time there, Shelley, and doing the diploma as well. Oh my goodness. So basically what, you know, she's just adding some advice there around GitHub and whether it's really
Yeah.
detrimental if it's just her main portfolio projects. And
Yeah, no, no, that's absolutely fine. As long as it references well-structured code within the language that you're ideally applying for. That is the main thing. That's all people are looking for, from your GitHub anyway. So if anyone's ever requesting to see your GitHub, that is it. It's a couple of minutes flick. They're not spending half an hour rifling through your code, ripping it apart. It's literally just to see how do you structure code, and just give it one good example of that. That's absolutely fine. There's no stress around that at all.
Perfect. And then really impressive as well. So like everyone's got different kind of starting points. And for like, for someone like Shelley then when she's at an interview and she's able to explain that this much has been learned, like whilst spinning a hell of a lot of plates, like that's it's a really nice kind of situation once you get to interview to understand what someone's starting point was and how much they've managed to achieve and how committed they are to it. So stuff like that is brilliant. And it's
100%.
something, isn't it? It's so true. And it's something that we see all the time, because, people who are learning like this on a flexible basis are often doing it because they need that flexibility around other commitments. So it's pretty amazing. And just,
Definitely.
sorry, just one last thing. And it actually goes back to that question from David. And it just kind of ties in, funny enough, nicely with what Shelley asked. We do these alumni webinars quite a lot, Charles. And we usually have 3 people at them. And they're people who've graduated who are still in our community but have graduated off the actual program and are working as developers now, and they come back and just kind of give some tips about their experiences. And on one of the recent ones, one of the participants was Tanya, and like that, she was like raising a little boy in her own and working and doing this program. So she just got really organized about her plan, and she was totally changing careers from event management. But she managed to identify a company that did this kind of summer internship, and she paused the course for 6 weeks, and she wanted to do it like live in their offices, and she did that, and ultimately then they hired her. So it all ended up being so efficient. But it was I suppose she had to make a calculated guess, but she felt really, like she paused the course for 6 weeks and was like, went and did it. But she said from her perspective, she just knew that she wanted to have some kind of real life contact with people, and that this would give her a good insight so that later if she was going interviewing, she'd be more comfortable talking about it. And that was what she decided worked for her, and it worked out beautifully. So just kind of take the time to think about what suits you as well and what you would make you feel
it's tailored to you, isn't it? We're all human. Everyone's got different things going on. So it's case by case, and as long as you feel like it's something that's going to add value, then definitely.
Exactly. Okay. Well, look, come here. I think we've managed to get back to all of those questions, and we've also managed to do it within time. So it's a good thing you talk really, really quickly, Charles.
Do I actually? I hope not too quick.
All recruiters talk really, really quickly. Yeah, there's so much to kind of get through. No, but so come here, for anyone who hasn't downloaded it, that job spec is there. Thank you all so much, Alexa, Shelley, David. I can't scroll down. Sorry, my thing has disappeared. But some really great questions there and really helpful. We all have 10 minutes to the hour, so I'm sure Charles is going to race off and make a phone call somewhere. But any of the rest of you that are here, you could tweak your CVs and get them in for that Python role if that's the way you're headed, because it sounds like that's going to move 100%. Pretty quickly. So look, all I can say for now is thank you so much, Charles. Good to have you back. That rosette is on its way to you. So you can share.
Wait. I can't wait for that. 100%.
You can share that on LinkedIn now as soon as you get it.
100%. 100%. And if anyone who wants to apply for that role, if you've already added me on LinkedIn to apply for it, just drop me your CV in the chat and just say looking to apply for the Python role, and then I'll get someone to drop you a call, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. So they can do it as easy as that through LinkedIn. Bingo.
Literally like that. Just chuck it in the LinkedIn chat, and then it'll either be me or someone from the team, and we'll get in there. No problem.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. And good luck with it, and let us know how it all goes. But look, we'll have you back again very soon. But in the meantime, obviously send us links, and everybody will be in your network. So that you'll be getting to know everybody very soon. But that's it. Come here, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much, Charles. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Remember, keep smiling, guys. All right. See you later.
See you later. Bye.
See ya.